You're listening to Expertly Said, a podcast on the art and impact of communication. I'm Kristen Sweeney, founder and CEO of Every Little Word. My guest today is Dr. Rajiv Saini, Chief Scientific Officer at H2 Ocean. Dr. Saini is a Harvard Medical School graduate specializing in clinical operations with a concentration in industry leadership. A dentist and periodontist by training, he's recognized for his expertise in oral systemic health research. His work primarily examines the host's inflammatory and immune responses to periodontal infections, establishing periodontitis as a significant risk factor for various systemic diseases. Experienced in implementing scientific strategies in a variety of R&D operations, with his major focus on projecting research value propositions and mapping new avenues for scientific growth and innovation. His scientific portfolio includes more than 170 peer-reviewed publications in high-impact journals, 5 books, 3 book chapters, and multiple patents. His globally recognized scientific contributions and numerous research awards highlight his pioneering role in scientific advancement. Dr. Saini, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you, Kristen. Thank you for having me in your show. I appreciate
I'm
that.
very excited to have you here. Always like to start with a little bit of an origin story. So we heard in your bio a little bit about your many accomplishments, but can you share a little bit more about that journey, how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, I started my journey as a dentist, born in a family of doctors, and really they want their kid to become a doctor. So I choose to become a path of dentistry. Finished my dental school, then immediately I pursued my path to do my master's in periodontology and oral implantology because that's what where that integrates to oral and systemic health, how they both are interconnected to each other and how it reflects each other in terms of health and disease. But one of my greatest passion was clinical research. So I was heavily involved at that time in the clinical research, doing a lot of my time, splitting my days between clinical dentistry and the research at that time. And one of the other thing that I was really involved is communications. The scientific communications, because if it is not interpreted well, if it's not disseminated well, then the purpose of the science gets defeated. So a lot of things happened during my career, and then I moved to academics, multiple ranks of academia, and then finally I moved to Harvard, did my master's in operations and industry leadership, and then I work as a consultant in R&D, and then finally I also joined my current company as a chief scientific officer and putting some strong science behind the company into the public domain. So here we are talking, yeah.
Yeah, quite a journey, quite a journey. I love that you talked about communications being a part early on. Uh, can you tell us a little bit more about maybe some of the lessons that you learned early or
Yeah,
later in your career around communications, and how to do that effectively? I know we're going to get into kind of communicating for different audiences, but yeah, I'd love to hear any kind of early lessons.
yeah. Early in my career, I had an experience that completely changed how I think about scientific communications today. This actually goes back to the time when I was working both as a clinician and a researcher. So my days were split between very different worlds, focusing on multiple research projects. One of the studies was focused on something very ahead of that time, was how to better control the oral microbiome to improve the oral hygiene, healing, and the overall oral systemic health outcome. So we at that time had published a study for that project we were very proud of till now date, and it showed a very promising result. But it was very early stage, small sample size, tight controls, and a lot of limitations. So internally, we were very cautiously optimistic, like, yes, we did something great. And as a classical scientist thinking, the project seemed to be very interesting to us, but not definitive. Then after a few months, that really happened. I start seeing how the same study was being interpreted outside the lab in a multiple version. So one of my fellow clinician asked me, should we change our protocol right away based on the research you published? And I was a little surprised. And then a patient reached out to me and asking if this was the solution they would have been waiting for their, oral conditions. And ironically, I have seen that the headlines in some social media framed it like it's like a breakthrough study. And I remember thinking like that's not actually we did. The science had not changed, the data had not changed, only the language changed, but the language completely changed the behavior and the expectations of the people who are reading that science. So that's what clicked to my mind at that particular time. I remember that the real risk is not about the people who won't understand the science, it is they misunderstand the science and that misunderstanding with a lot of confidence. So that's the real pain. And that, blink the kind of a light bulb, like we have to be very cautious in able to how we interpret the science.
That is fascinating. I wasn't quite sure where we were going to end up with that, but the idea that the science took on this life of its own, because I think that uh, there's this maybe a sort of unspoken feeling, right? That if science is objective and it's factual and that it does move and it is unchanging.
Right.
But what you're talking about is it kind of being interpreted, and that you said I just want to make sure I've got this right, that the greatest challenge isn't people who just don't understand the science, but is actually misunderstanding very confidently.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating. I'm curious, and without getting too political, I think that misunderstanding and scientific interpretation is certainly a very hot topic right now. What kind of principles have you learned from that lesson to communicate what was already accurate to begin with, but to try to manage the interpretation, when something goes on to kind of have a life of its own?
Yeah. So, uh, so after that episode, I always ask myself, like, we should always understand what do we truly know in terms of an outcome of any science research project or any kind of even vaccine campaigns and so many other things. What we truly know, what we don't know, and what would be irresponsible to claim. So, because discovery creates knowledge, but communication actually determines whether that knowledge actually helps people or not. And to me, that's where the real leadership responsibility is. So, I mean, in terms of scientific breakdown, the most misunderstanding don't come from the bad science, but they came from the bad translation of that science. As a scientist, we are trained to be precise, but not accessible to people. Most of the time, I don't know what's your experience is, but you feel scientific world, the scientists are not so much involved in public domain even if the topic is hot in terms of politics or in terms of any news and media. Mostly they are at the back seats and they don't take the front seat in terms of communicating the real science. They will provide you the scientific data, but they will not give you that real depth of explanation of what to cut off and what to explain in liberation in terms of giving the right science.
Yeah.
Uh, the public often receives scientific information through filtration, through headlines, not context. So I have also put a key emphasis on that. Over complexity of a science creates disengagement, and simultaneously, simplification of the science also creates false certainty. So we have to be very cautious and balanced when we need to disseminate the new science.
Yeah, I love that. So when you were talking about accessibility, I was thinking, I have two relatives, my sister and a cousin of mine, who are both medical professionals, and I have a lot of medical professionals in my family, like many pharmacists, nurse practitioners, physicians. And so in general, I consider myself a like fairly well-educated layperson, right? Who's definitely not in that world, but uh, can mostly keep up. So there was something that happened, and my sister and my cousin all of a sudden kind of turn from addressing the general group to just
Okay.
talking to each other. And it was like they started speaking another language. And it made me realize how much interpretation they are doing all the time just to be able to get anyone to even like have a hope of keeping up. So um
Yeah,
it was that was as you
that's
were talking about
interesting.
just accessibility and that's quite a burden honestly on clinical and scientific folks to be kind of constantly translating in that way of constantly assessing how do I give you just enough and not too much. And certainly when we work with clients in complex spaces with science or other technical spaces, that's something we're always evaluating is
Yeah.
you need the context. If you oversimplify, as you said, I think you lose credibility very, very
Yes.
quickly.
Yeah.
Um, but
The
give too much and it overwhelms.
Yes, because data, scientific data is not evidence, and the evidence is not guidance. So the responsible communications means clearly stating what you are trying to give a message. So what is known, what is still evolving, and what should not be concluded. One of the biggest thing I also learned during my more than 2 decades of scientific career is over-promising damages trust, especially in the healthcare. So it's not a good way that you always gives a trustworthy sign. It's good to give a more fact-worthy signs. So that's a very hard lesson learned, but this is the core of the scientific communication, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. Now, what I think about when I think about patience, right? Patient communication, though, is that you could say it's like the what's in it for me, but I think someone who's maybe impacted by scientific research in some way, what they want to understand beyond the science is, okay, so what do I do now? What does this mean for me? What's the analysis that impacts me? Should I take a different action, pursue a different course? And I realize the science may not always be able to answer that. So how do you think about kind of balancing being judicious, accurate, precise, not overpromising with trying to provide the information that will help people make important decisions?
Yeah, very good question, Christine. I appreciate that you took this point. Patients, from a patient perspective, patients always want relevance, safety, and expectations of any clinical data, any scientific information that is available to them. They want meaning and context, and they hardly bother about the raw data. And I think this is something that happened during COVID time as well, when there's a huge complexity, there are different groups, favor and non-favorable for vaccination, and so many other things get involved into that. So the whole foundation for a patient perspective is if the information is coming from the science side, and that is the phase I totally believe, and I say that, that's the weak part of our scientific community, that we don't provide the science in a simplest way possible. And because one of the reason is that the science that is involved in the experiment and the research is so much very complex that sometimes it is very hard to simplify it so that it can reach to the general public. Now, in this era of social media where the news spread much more than in Insta and TikTok, so, it always get diluted and, changed to a different version when it moves from one platform to another platform based on the one who is interpreting the data. So I totally believe that communication is a very strong tool that should be used in a very precise and very ethical manner, especially in the healthcare, because people are making the real-time decisions about their health, about their lives, for themselves, for their loved ones. So any misinterpretation, sometimes it carries a heavy weight to them. So we have to be very precise about that.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about different platforms, and it's interesting because there is a point where I think you can make information available, but you can't. You also need to balance that with kind of meeting people where they are in order to reach them in the first place. So, you can refer them from a social media post back to some piece of content or a hub or somewhere where there's more deeper information available, but you can't force somebody to pursue the kind of full and broader context. You can,
Yes.
you know, and hey, I mean, the illusion of control, like it's everywhere, not to get too deep, but
Yeah.
it is, I think you also can't stuff every nuance into every message that you give. You have
Yes.
to kind of pick and choose and hope that you've created enough kind of cross connections and availability and accessibility with information that people who really want to make those decisions will pursue the full context that they need.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Christine, one of the strongest point in the dissemination of the science is that to avoid, a science theater and kind of a hype culture. I mean, visibility should never come at the cost of accuracy. I mean, even in the world of science, even in the world of the scientific research, there's always a pressure to publish the research from the, scientific point of view in order to for their academic and their career growth. They always want to publish fast. And sometimes, in order to publishing fast and multiple research papers, uh, the information of one research project is published in multiple research papers. So there is a no interlinked connected to that. And even a scientific mind and the person who is working in that domain can understand it. But the real world scenario, the public in general doesn't understand how it is connected. So sometimes then this science comes up with the buzzwords like, breakthrough or game changer. So, I mean, these words should be avoided in the real world scenarios, in the social media and stuff like that, because people often get confused on those words. If I strongly believe in the world of science, if your scientific message needs hype to work, the science probably is not ready yet.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, yeah, that the science should ultimately speak for itself.
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to stick with this, and I will say, Dr. Saini, I think that we've inadvertently reversed the order of this episode, and I think we are very deep into the one big idea right now, and I'm so good with that. So we're gonna keep rolling um, in that regard. I am Oh gosh, so many good questions I want to ask you. So let's talk about this for a moment because, credibility, I think, especially just in the AI era, which we are knee deep in, if not waist deep
Yeah.
right now, is very much a buzzword. And
Yeah.
um, I'm curious if you can give us insight about credibility specifically in the more scientific context. So when you are publishing research, what are the things before we get to translating it for patients or a general population, the science itself, the way that that research is presented, what are the things that you focus on and that you're looking for when you read other publications to signal credibility and that the science is strong and that the science is sound?
Yes. So, I mean, it is very important to understand, like, translation does not end at the publication from the science perspective point of view, as you have asked. It begins there. So we have to understand when we are writing or reading a research paper, like how it is interpreted, like how it is contextualized, and how the outcomes of the study, like, basically the study is your main idea, the research methodology, and the key conclusions, and finally the key message. So whether the key message is responsibly applied, a lot of time the study has been done in a small patient, limited controls, and a lot of limitations apply to that. So there's a different layers of translation. And that is where many promising science factors finding fail, not scientifically, but communicatively. Building trust, as you mentioned, in the era of AI is very critical, and especially when we have so many inputs coming up. I was reading a news article day before yesterday. Now people are finding much more health-related answers from ChatGPT and other social media platforms rather than even before approaching to their primary care physician. So they just want to, find themselves health-related questions. And I am not against all the AI platform. I think they are meant to mean to help people in general. But since there is no, a check on that whether the information is 100% accurate or not. So I will say that if these platforms take the responsibility of saying even that we don't know yet, it builds much more credibility with the users using them. Because at the end of the day, transparency beats confidence theater. I mean, repetition of honest messaging matters more than viral moments. Uh, I want to say that people don't lose trust because science changes. They lose trust when we pretend it never does. So, I mean, the whole idea here is to make the research so much simplified in these AI generated platforms so that people understand it but not misunderstand it, and that's why they are lost. For the research publications that are published in scientific journals, they have to follow certain guidelines and there is a certain amount of scientific language. They cannot simplify it in order to, otherwise it will not be published. So there is a challenge to that, but definitely, yes, there are certain platforms people have been using even before the AI age, like WebMD and other things where they can go for, small size science bites information, they are getting it. But yes, at the end of the day, it's the trust and the source of the science where they are pulling these references.
Yeah, those guardrails and those boundaries, I think, are a little underappreciated, but so important. I think, we're seeing now how, as you said, like certain guidelines and standards that have to be met are um, are the ways that we ensure quality, for lack of a better term. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in your experience of, you know, said I think was well over 150 publications, as well as uh, you are credited with articles on the H2 Oceans blog, right? So you
Yeah.
are well versed in this full range of communication. I'm curious if you have any tips, tricks, guidance, like how do you um, prevent yourself or kind of work around what I call the curse of knowledge, right? Which is that you have all the context, you have all the scientific information, making sure that when you're writing for perhaps the broadest, most general audience, that you are not being overly technical,
Yep.
or like sometimes that can be very hard to do for yourself. So I'm curious if there's anything you do that kind of helps
Y-
you with that.
Yeah. I wish during my time I would have much more podcasts like you are running now, where people can learn more and more and get, those skills, advices from the experts like different guests that are coming to your platform that really, helps in order to finish your tone and clarity. So we learned the hard way. So communication, I believe, is a leadership skill, not a soft skill. It is always, not well, I will use the word, it is not well accomplished in terms of during even the medical schools when people go, or the dental schools, even the research universities. There is a no subject lines that really focuses on scientific communication. So there are, degrees related to that, but I'm talking about a person going to a dental or med school. They have not been so much intensified on what is the importance of scientific communication. So that's why the 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 hold of that particular subject becomes loose. So you asked me like how I use my skills. So I always ask myself when I write a blog for people or in general domain, public domain, who is this for? What they really want to know, not what I believe. And it is very important when, especially when we are working the corporate side, to separate the education from the promotion. Because if we start pushing the products in the center stage, then people don't trust the science. People don't trust your writings. So it's always 100% important to explain the work without promoting the product. Once you have your message delivered to them, once they understood that message, then it is very easy and simple to give the solutions to their problem by giving an option for that particular product in
Hmm.
focus, like it's your wish and will, this product may help you. So in that way, people get engaged with you. It's you don't want to forcefully endorse them with the science which you want to tell them. Let them, absorb the science which they want to look for. So that's why it keeps them engaged.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking, who hasn't downloaded, gone to read a white paper or a blog or an article and realized it was a sales pitch, from the very beginning. It's like the only solution to this problem is this,
Yeah,
and you're right. We're talking about, building trust, and that you said it. I love what you said about how that undermines kind of the science from the beginning. It undermines your ability to be objective, your expertise, if you will, even outside of a scientific context. So that's a great insight and really helpful. You set up nicely. I do actually want to talk about the role of education. So specifically, um, as chief scientific officer at H2 Ocean, um, the company, and you'll please correct me if I'm getting any of the particulars wrong, but the products are based on a particular type of sea salt. So something that I noticed that was really interesting is there's got to be a lot of education that goes into, you know, 7 different kinds of salt and how those different types have different impacts for what somebody is looking for or what kind of treatment they may be pursuing. This is a big educational component, and your products range from everything from, tattoo aftercare to um, oral treatments for chemo patients. So
yeah,
broad, really, really broad audience as well. Um, how do you begin to think about education
yeah,
across all of those different vectors?
yeah, yeah, definitely. It's a very great question. Thank you for asking that question. Uh, it all started with sea salt. And when the company's founder and CEO Eddie Kohler started the company long back in 2000, when sea salt was not in a big picture, when people don't consider sea salt as a major ingredient in food or in cosmetic industry. Now, in every grocery store you go, everything is sea salt. Even for the ice creams, chips, chocolate, they write bold and clear sea salt as a key ingredient in their product. So there is a reason for that because sea salt is like thousands years before, even before the existence of human life, before because it comes from the ocean, and ocean exists before human exists. So,
Sure.
so sea salt is nothing new, but what people don't understand is there are hundreds of type of salts, even sea salts. And when people say that, we are using salt rinse, for example, I want to tell you a short story. This cancer patient often recommended because of the conditions they are facing because of chemotherapy and radiation therapy. There's a huge amount of oral side effects they have to bear, like, metallic taste, dry mouth, ulcerations, and so many other soreness inside the mouth. And most of the cancer hospitals, institutes, and the research departments and the oncologists refer them to use salt rinse as part of getting them relieved from that condition. And that's huge because right now almost 21 million people in US suffer from one or the other type of cancer. So that's huge. So now the situation is that the normal salt, the table salt, is very weak. It only contains two ingredients, sodium and chloride. But the company like Ocean uses sea salt from the Red Sea, which is located somewhere in the Middle East, in around the Egypt.
Mhm.
So that contains 82 plus minerals as compared to the two minerals of sodium and chloride. That makes a huge difference. Secondly, the table salt is, processed very heavily because of the industrialization, and a lot of chemicals are added in the processing of the table salt. But the sea salt itself is raw. It's always evaporated, sun-dried, hand-harvested, and it is unrefined. And that's why all the mineral contents remains intact in the sea salt, and that gives the mineral content to the skin, to the tissues, and that helps in healing and the other healthy outcomes in the human body. Also, it is very important to understand that our body, blood and saliva and all the fluids are very well connected to the minerals and the enzymes which are found in the ocean. And the sea salt coming from the ocean, if it is pure, unrefined, hand harvested, sun dried, without any kind of you know uh, additives added to that, it almost matches the body saline system, and that's why it gives a definitive positive outcomes. And on that belief, the whole company is based on the fundamentals of how sea salt can improve the healthcare from all perspective of different solutions. Either we are looking for tattoo aftercare, because tattoo is a very, very old historical art. People do it from so many centuries before. The healing is critical for that, healing and infection control. So if you are using a right aftercare product, then it means a lot of vibrancy and life to the tattoo healing. Same way, oral care, hair care, nasal care. There's more than 20 categories of products the H2 Ocean focused on in order to give a broader perspective of sea salt based healthcare in human systems.
Well, I could say you definitely have your messaging dialed in because that was a succinct but thorough. So I love that we were able to demo everything we've been talking about here. Appreciate the education. And yeah, it was just such a great example of the concepts and ideas we've been chatting about up to this point. So that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, so let me see. I think that um, the last thing I would ask you is from a let's go with kind of like one takeaway for our audience here.
Okay.
If you'd like the audience to remember one thing from this conversation about scientific communication and expanding and translating scientific communication kind of beyond the journal, what's that takeaway you would like to share with them?
I want to give one takeaway that understand the science, don't understand the data. I mean, once you understand the science, you will much more you will get much more deep into the data after the next phase. Often people, if you look at the discussions, even in the social media, how people communicate, how many people get affected, what is the percentage of that? Don't look into that. First, try to understand what is this purpose of this science. If you understand the purpose of the science, you will clearly understand the solution that particular science is bringing to that. And then you can look into the deeper numbers like how many percentage, what are the criteria. So try to look into the solutions based on the science rather than just tapping into the number, because that's how it rolls out in internet and the social media. 39% of the patients get improved by this drug. Now, 39% of the patient means what? It sounds like big number. Sometimes people come at like 82% of the study population get benefited with this study. So if the study has only 10 patients and you are saying 82% of the study, it sounds like, wow, 82%, but only 7 patients are there, right? So try to think, what is this science? Why this science is in use? And then look into the numbers, like, what is the statistics behind that? And then you can look for the further scientific data. Don't jump into the data first on the headline.
Yeah, I love that. So you don't have those, as you said, those kind of orphan facts that become a
Yes.
headline. And I was thinking as you were describing it, even the word like 39% of the patients, right?
Yes.
Because that's referring to a specific study versus 39% of patients. Oh, now that's a treatment that's out, it's just got a different connotation.
Yep.
So hey, words matter. Dr. Saini, this has been great. I want to transition us now into our wrap-up segment, which is the last word. So every guest
Okay.
on the show gets these same 5 questions to answer. Just go with your gut first instinct on these, okay?
Okay.
All right. Question number 1. What's your favorite word to say out loud?
I will say curiosity, because it is where every discovery and honestly every good question starts.
Excellent. Question 2. What's a word you know from reading, but you're not quite sure how to pronounce it out loud?
I will say probabilistic, because science is really about likelihoods and not certainties, but it's not easiest word to say quickly.
That's fair. I'm going to count the syllables in that one later. What's one phrase or saying you wish could be retired for good?
I will say trust the science. I'm often you see in the news, in the social media, trust the science. No, I would rather say understand the science, because trust comes from clarity and not slogans.
What's a communication practice or principle that's non-negotiable for you?
Always communicate the value, not the data. I mean, data informs, but value is what helps people decide.
What's the last thing you read, heard, or watched that really stuck with you?
I think the power of storytelling, simple talk, a simple story, how people remembers, is much more value than high data integrated slides and the complexity of the research. It completely changed how things presented, and that's what I practice in my presentations as well as in my topics.
Excellent. I didn't even want to give any commentary. Those answers were so amazing. I just wanted to let you let you roll with those. So thank you so much. Dr. Saini, that kind of brings our episode to a close here. But before we go, if our listeners want to learn more about you, what are the best place or places for them to find you?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to connect with anyone who wants to have deep questions or just want to have some words with me. I mean, LinkedIn will be the best way to reach out to me, and I will respond to them. And other than that, I think that will be the most easiest way to find out to me and to get a quick response.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate the work you are doing towards communication and how to better understand the communication. And don't underestimate the power of a real communication. So thank you to Christine, you as well, for putting this into this limelight.
Oh, you're very, very welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
That's it for this episode of Expertly Said. We're produced by Every Little Word, a boutique content and communications agency. If you liked what you heard, you know what to do. Subscribe, share the episode with a colleague, or leave us a review. If you want to connect with me directly, please do. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Kristen Sweeney. Thanks for listening. Talk soon.